Hello, class. Welcome to week 8 and of US History 101. And so there's just a few things that I want to just kind of go over. Some things addressing from last week, and then some just for this week. So we went over the topic of women in history, and in particular of colonial and U.S. history. And many of you saw that as very negative, as it was. And so the one thing that I just kind of want to remind my students, and I say this from all the time, is that the problem sometimes with studying U.S. history is if we're not doing that in the context of world history, we always seem like we're the best or the worst. I talk about this all the time. And what I want to point out is that unfortunately, sexism, patriarchy, has been the norm of most of recorded history and most civilizations. While there have been tribal groups that are more egalitarian, we do see occasionally female monarchs take place in the ancient world, or kind of tribal leaders. Unfortunately, the entire globe has had this trend. So in other words, each civilization, each geographic area has often had to deal with this. I mean, again, not all, but a huge chunk. And then, of course, the other problem is that history being written by only a few elite men in most cultures tended to tell the stories mainly from the male perspective. Now, again, this isn't 100% true, but it's enough. It's true enough to say that we've had this as a kind of trend throughout the globe. And so it's a struggle for historians to try to piece together histories of people that weren't written about, that yet we know were contributing a lot more than they were given credit for. Women being one group, but it can be other minorities or other classes and different civilizations that are just not given credit, and we don't know much about them. And then historians are trying to reconstruct maybe a way to kind of like get their story out. And unfortunately, when we have a lack of documentation, it becomes more of a struggle on how to do that in a way that would still be precise enough. In other words, we can't teach the history that we want it to be. We have to teach what we can reconstruct of the past. And sometimes we really get it wrong, especially when we have limited information. And then when we don't have much at all, it becomes more of a struggle. So, but it's an important thing, I think. I mean, it's important what Howard Zinn did, I think, on the topic of women for sure. And just to kind of actually like reiterate that, I have several of these volumes of these works from I think it's 98. I just looked in here, yeah, 98. This is a beautifully bound kind of encyclopedia set type of, but it says, Great Men and Famous Women. Think about this for a second. Great men and famous... Well, it's not great men and great women. It's not famous men and famous women. Only men can be great, but women can at least be famous. And it's not subtle. I mean, this is not like the political correct police coming out going, okay, we're reading too much into this. No, you're reading it properly. That understanding of that difference. And, there's an Orthodox Jewish prayer, and I brought this up. I watched a forum at the College of Women in Spirituality. And there's a prayer that I talked with a female rabbi about. It's the Shelo Asani Isha prayer, that where an Orthodox male prays, "Thank God I was not born a woman." And she said, "Oh yeah, when I was a little girl, I just closed my ears every time I heard the men say that prayer." Then in the Zen Buddhist priest, the woman there, she said, well, Even Buddhism has its anti-woman traditions. There's a text called the Blood Bowl Sutra in one of the Zen traditions that said all women are basically cursed because of their menstruation, and that they make the world impure through their bleeding, because when they have their periods, they wash it, and then the impurity goes into the water down the stream and into the soil and makes everything impure. So there's this long global tradition of negative things used towards women, and it's unfortunate, for sure. And it's good that we're now at least seeing a trend that historians are trying to at least give proper acknowledgement to this topic, I think. And so that's all I wanted to say on that. And then I just want to address this next section on Andrew Jackson. This documentary is long. It is really good, as I say. Okay, and I'm glad it's still up on YouTube. And at the time I made the voice lectures, Trump was running for president, and now he is president. And it's interesting that I read somewhere, unless it's fake news, that Trump put a portrait up of Andrew Jackson, and that Andrew Jackson is the president that he looks to as an influence or inspiration, should I say. And I think you'll see very clearly after we look at the kind of roughness of Andrew Jackson as to how there would be this draw that Trump would have to him. And the last thing that I'm just going to say is this. I always try to give my lectures in a nuanced way. I have much more passionate thoughts or views about certain things that presidents do or don't do or did and didn't do or whatever. But I give this in a relatively kind of neutral way, but I take a little approach to, when I talk politics freely outside of my class and what I do in the class. So I'm just going to say that as a general rule, if I just want to out myself, most things done in history up until now are not things that I really am comfortable with. I guess in that case I'm kind of a radical, but I'm also kind of a conservative. I guess what I mean is, I just think that the past, I kind of look at the past and characters in the past, and I am critical of, I try to basically think about what I want to be as a person now, as opposed to emulating people of the past. But if there's qualities that come out of anything in the past or in a person, then I want to emulate what I think is positive. And then last thing I want to say is that I used the term in one of my lectures, and I said the term illegal aliens. I was referring to a speech by Ronald Reagan. And it's just a term that is kind of politically loaded, and I really don't, I prefer the term undocumented workers. Some say that that's politically loaded. What we can talk about is people who are working in the United States outside the law. In other words, they didn't get legally documented. And that's a real thing, right? Okay, whatever side you take on that. But there's so much, people get different ideas about, the use of language, and I just wanted to kind of I just wanted to address that. And anything else? That's it. I hope you enjoy this, though. I don't think you'll be bored, regardless of what your thoughts are on this, and I will end my announcement here.